Week 10 of the fantasy season is here. And before you set those final starting lineups, here are 5 stats that you need to know before Week 10 of the fantasy season. All right, coming off of his worst fantasy performance of the year with 7.7 fantasy points in Week 9, Jonathan Taylor is positioned for a huge workload here in Week 10 of the season behind an offensive line that is ranking 3rd overall in run block win rate at 74.3%. The Falcons defense has now allowed the 10th most rushing yards per game, averaging 124.4 rushing yards per game. They are also ranking bottom 10 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running back position here in the 2025 season. So this is a great spot for Jonathan Taylor. And let's be honest, I mean, if you own Jonathan Taylor, you were rolling with him no matter what here in Week 10 of the season. You just absolutely have to start him on a week out basis. But I know coming off of last week, maybe you feel slightly concerned. Don't feel concerned. I just think overall, this matchup, it kind of feels like some people still think the Falcons defense is something to be afraid of, and they are ranking pretty high against opposing quarterbacks, not playing the worst against opposing wide receivers. Have allowed the fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends on the season so far, but don't let any of that worry you. This overseas game is a great bounce back spot for the Colts, who were in a position last week where they needed to throw the football, and that loss to the Steelers really kind of forced Jonathan Taylor out of that Week 9 matchup. Nothing to worry about here. I think, honestly, Jonathan Taylor could have one of his highest fantasy point scoring days here in Week 10 of the season. And that's also why I'm headed straight to Underdog to take the over on Jonathan Taylor to score a rushing touchdown here in Week 10. Don't forget, all new users who sign up on Underdog using promo code THECATCH are getting a free NFL Pick'em to use towards NFL Week 10 action. Take that free pick'em, take JT to score a touchdown. If both of those lines hit, you're going to automatically double your cash entry. On top of that, as long as you guys sign up using promo code THECATCH on Underdog, they're also going to give you $50 in bonus cash as soon as you play through $5 on Underdog. So don't forget to sign up using promo code THECATCH on Underdog if you want to take advantage of all of their Week 10 exclusive NFL offers. Next up, we have no Bucky Irving once again here in Week 10 of the season. That means Rachaad White will get the start at the running back position for the Buccaneers, and this is a tough matchup against the New England Patriots, top 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running back position, and they have not allowed an opposing running back to reach 50 total rushing yards. They are the only team since 1950 to do that through the first 9 games of the season. So we know this is a stiff matchup for Rachaad White and what should be a relatively competitive game overall between the Patriots and the Buccaneers. But I will mention the Patriots have allowed 55 total receptions off of 64 targets to opposing running backs on the season and 367 total receiving yards to opposing running backs. So they've been very stout against the run. If you look in the top 10 teams in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs, they rank the highest in terms of total receiving yards allowed and receptions allowed to opposing running backs. So there's still some leeway here in what should be a game where both offenses are firing on all cylinders, throwing the football quite a bit. There is still a path for Rachaad White at home to have a solid fantasy outing. Don't forget, we look since week 4 of the season, he has had 3 or more targets in every game except for 1, and 3 or more receptions in every game except for 1 as well. So he still gets that involvement in the receiving game on a regular basis. And I think this is going to be a good matchup for both teams involved. Like I've been saying, we look at the past 2 games for the Bucs, like the week 8 against the Saints, the defense was doing so much that literally, the offense didn't need to do anything. Week 7 against the Lions, it was just not their week. They've had an extra week to rest, prepare everything during their bye week. They're going to be at home against a really good Patriots team, but I think this could be one of those matchups where the matchups on paper here kind of go out of the window. So I think if you are in a position where you have to start Rachaad White because we are once again not getting Bucky Irving this week, or you have other issues at the running back position, and Rachaad White's in your starting lineup, I've seen a lot of people kind of not want to start him because of this matchup, and I think that's fair to a degree, but I still think he has a really safe floor as we move into Week 10. All right, Giants quarterback Jackson Dart has been exceptional over the past couple weeks, especially due to his dual threat ability. He has scored 19 or more fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games, so we know he's got a great floor, but also a high ceiling. And the Bears defense has been a fantasy dream matchup for opposing quarterbacks, allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to the position. So we go into this week 10 matchup now with some news that the weather in this game is supposed to be pretty bad. Some high winds, some potential snow even over the next 24 to 48 hours there in Chicago, wet conditions. So I know some people are starting to kind of freak out here and not feel great about this matchup, where early in the week we were looking at this matchup in terms of fantasy points allowed by the Bears and by the Giants, and the matchups overall across different positions. Like, we should have everybody in our starting lineups who's playing in this game. And I don't want to freak out too much about the weather, but if it does end up having an impact here, one of the players who's absolutely going to be safe in this matchup is Jackson Dart because of that dual threat capacity that we talked about. We look since week 4 of the season, he has had 55 or more rushing yards in 4 out of these 6 games that he has started at the quarterback position. And he's had a rushing touchdown, like I said, in 5 out of those 6 games. So he will get that involvement throughout the course of the game, but also when the Giants are near the red zone as well. He always has the capacity to run the football in for a score. And this is still a great matchup. Inclement weather or not, this is a great spot if you guys own Jackson Dart. And I still want to believe that other players in this matchup, like Theo Johnson, Rondell Robinson, all the Bears offensive starters, maybe even Darius Slayton for the Giants, are going to go into this matchup with pretty safe floors, because both of these defenses have been absolutely awful over the past couple weeks. So we'll see how it shakes out, but at the very least, one of the safest starts in this matchup between the Giants and the Bears is going to be Jackson Dart here in week 10. All right, Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid has averaged 16 fantasy points in the 4 games this season in which he has seen at least 6 targets. Even though he has split snaps with Dawson Knox and Jackson Hawes, Kincaid leads the group in routes run, which is definitely the most important metric here in terms of fantasy production. He's in a great spot this week against the Dolphins, who are giving up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends on the season. And I talked about this in the start sit video earlier in the week. Dalton Kincaid is one of my very favorite starts at the tight end position so far here in week 10. We look on the season for the Dolphins. They've given up 614 receiving yards, 57 receptions off of 69 targets, and 6 receiving touchdowns. So they are tied for the 2nd most receiving touchdowns allowed to tight ends on the season so far. This is a smash spot if you guys own Dalton Kincaid. Last week showed up against Kansas City with 22.1 fantasy points, 6 targets, 6 grabs, 101 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown after not really getting any involvement in week 8 in a great matchup against the Panthers, who have not been very good against opposing tight ends on the season as well. But he was coming off of that injury, coming out of the bye week, and that was a game script where the Bills didn't need to throw the football. They were decimating the Panthers, especially through their run game and James Cook. And I mean, that could happen again here in week 10 against the Dolphins. Don't get me wrong. May not be as competitive of a matchup, but the Bills are on the road here, and these divisional matchups can always surprise us, right? So I think Kincaid is just in a great overall spot. If you guys own him, you have to roll with him this week, whatever it may be. I'm in a league where I lost Tucker Kraft, but I was also rostering, Dalton Kincaid, and I'm feeling great in that aspect, except for the fact that I lost Tucker Kraft. But I think if you guys have Dalton Kincaid, he's one of the best starts at the tight end position here in week 10 of the season. He absolutely needs to be in your guys' starting lineups. All right, and speaking of the Panthers running back Rico Dowdle has been exceptional over the past couple weeks, even with seeing Chuba Hubbard come back into the mix. He's had 4 games with at least 18 touches and has averaged 26.2 fantasy points in those contests. Great matchup this week against a defense in the New Orleans Saints that's allowing the 9th most rushing yards per game at 129.4 rushing yards per game. The Panthers offensive line also ranks 12th in run block win rate at 71.9% overall, which makes this an even greater matchup. He's coming off of a week 9 performance, 28.1 fantasy points, 130 yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions, and 11 receiving yards. It's a pretty good run defense in the Green Bay Packers. And like I said, in games where he's had over 18 total touches, he is guaranteeing you guys double-digit fantasy points. The Panthers are at home this week going up against a rookie backup quarterback and Tyler Shuck. This Panthers defense, they're not great or anything, but they are a pretty good defense. I think they're a bit underrated right now. They match up really well against the Saints offense. I think that the Panthers are going to be in a lot of short yardage situations this week, probably be able to create some turnovers. Everything is here for Rico Dowdle to have an absolutely monster game. And I know a lot of you guys out there, if you own Rico Dowdle, you were starting him anyways, but ultimately he is a player that you more than likely got off the waiver wire. Definitely didn't draft him for most of you guys out there. And you may have other options on your roster, even at RB1 and RB2 that you feel good about in the flex spots, and you may be making some of those kind of tougher decisions here late in the season. Rico Dowdle is no longer a tough decision, especially in a matchup like this one against the Saints. He is in line for an absolutely monster fantasy day. No matter what you guys do, if you own Rico Dowdle, you are firing him up here in week 10 of the season. There you guys have it. There are my 5 stats that you need to know before week 10 of the fantasy season. Don't forget, guys, I'll answer as many fantasy football questions as I can in the comment section down below. So if you guys need anything whatsoever moving into Sunday's action, please drop me a comment. I'll get back to as many of you guys as I can. And while you guys are down there, it does me a huge favor, helps out the channel tremendously when you guys hit that subscribe button and that like button on the way out. And when the videos and playlists pop up on the screen, don't forget, we have everything you could possibly need here on the channel to dominate week 10 of the fantasy season. So go check all of the content out. And with that, I'll say good luck, everybody. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.